states of consciousness and sleep. For this, I want to make sure that you know that sleep stages 3 and 4 have been combined and are now referred to as stage 3 only. There will be images and mentions of stage 4 throughout some of our materials, but in your mind, just edit it to stage 3. So charts and graphs and resources are still catching up with this shift. So the provided images are still better than the ones that are available at this time. So I hope that doesn't cause too much confusion. Here we go.
Consciousness. The awareness of internal and external experiences. Levels of awareness vary. If you take a look at, say, playing poker, how many of you play poker? Yeah, we used to say checkers and chess, but nobody plays that anymore. So poker is the game to play now. When you are playing poker, are you paying really great attention to what's going on? Yeah? Okay. That's how I play too. That's why we never win. So if you are actually really into poker and you're into it to win money, you're paying some pretty close attention to what's going on. What cards are being laid? What are the chances of somebody beating you? Yada, yada, yada. How is that different from texting and walking at the same time? As you're texting and walking down the hallway, how much attention are you giving to the outside world besides your phone? Not much. Enough so that you don't run into somebody or the wall, hopefully. But beyond that, your world is right here. Have you ever been texting or something and somebody's like, hey, and you're like, oh yeah, hey, because you didn't see them because you're so busy texting? Does that ever happen? So our levels of awareness can definitely vary. We can be very attentive, such as playing chess or poker or Wii, or pretty minimal. This is a fun one. You're walking down the hall and all of a sudden you are where you are supposed to be getting to, and you don't really remember walking there. You catch yourself waking up out of kind of a daydream and you're like, ooh, did I miss my exit? Am I okay? Nope, we're good. We're good. Yeah, the autopilot mode. Pretty crazy. So we're paying enough attention that we don't run into other cars or other people as we're walking, but not enough to actually record anything that's happening between A and B. Consciousness is hard to study and describe. So ponder to yourself, why is consciousness hard to study and describe? You can't measure it. Why can't you measure it? You can't touch it. You can't study consciousness, but why? If I said on a scale of 1 to 5, what is your level of awareness right now? Can you tell me? It's intangible. How about this? How do you know when you're daydreaming? When you wake up, you're daydreaming, right? So here you are, you're sitting in class, you're paying attention, paying attention, paying attention. Whoa, I wasn't paying attention. You kind of catch yourself in that daydreaming stage. As you're in daydreaming stage, do you know that you're in there? Do you sometimes wonder how long you've been daydreaming? How much did I miss? Not in this class, but in other classes, right? This class is too cool. So consciousness is hard to study and describe because we're not aware of how conscious we are until something changes or until it grabs our attention or something shifts. Okay? How do you know when you're asleep? When you wake up. Do you know you're asleep while you're asleep? Sometimes. If you have a lucid dream, you might be able to kind of control, but at that point, you're kind of teetering between awake and asleep. So that was kind of a gray area. But for the most part, if you fall asleep, let's say in class again, you fall asleep in class, do you know you're asleep? Not until you nod off or your head, you do one of those things or your hand falls off of your hand. That was always funny in high school. I laughed at those kids. So instead of studying consciousness, because it's intangible, we can't measure it, we don't really know what our conscious level is all the time, we're going to study altered states. So next question is, what are altered states of consciousness? Talked about one. Sleep. Drugs. Does that change your consciousness levels a little bit? Oh yeah. Drugs, sleep. Here's another big one. Meditating and hypnosis, the other one. Sleep, hypnosis, meditation, and drugs. We're going to spend most of our time on sleep. Hypnosis is, eh, we have some studies, but it's still very controversial. Meditation is another one of those where it's kind of controversial, hard to study. Drugs, if we have time, we'll talk about drugs. My theory on drugs, if you want to know about drugs, you probably already know about drugs. So we're not going to dig too deep in that. So we're going to focus mainly on sleep. So here we go. Jumping into sleep. Sleep is a biological rhythm, which is pretty cool if you know what a biological rhythm is. Biological rhythms are periodic fluctuations in physiological functioning. To kind of simplify that a little bit, things that happen on a regular basis because of biological reasons. So what happens to either us or animals on a certain schedule because of a biological reasoning? Sleep. We sleep on a pretty regular schedule, right? Give or take. Eating. What else? If you look at animals, what do animals do on a pretty consistent? Hibernate. What else do animals do? Animals do one other thing. This happens right around spring and winter. How about migration? Yeah. Fly south for the winter, fly north for the summer. Women, do you have one in particular? Yep. Fairly regular. Yearly, we can talk about migration and hibernation. Monthly, we have the menstrual cycle. Sorry, guys. And daily, sleep and activity. You guys are just getting all kinds of sex talk in here. It slows down. This is probably the last of it. So all these things happen on a regular basis. They have different time periods. One's yearly, one's monthly, one's daily, but they all happen on a very consistent basis because of a physiological, biological need. The reason it happens is that we have some sort of internal clock that says, all right, it's time to fly south. A very specific example of a biological rhythm is circadian rhythm. It's a funny word to look at. It's pronounced circadian. And under circadian rhythm, we look at 24-hour biological cycles or rhythms, things that happen every 24 hours pretty consistently. For example, our blood pressure is on a relatively consistent 24-hour cycle, as well as our body temperature. I'll show you a picture. You can visually see it. Here's a chart. It shows 3 different things in particular. What is it showing you? Circadian rhythm. And then breaking it down. This bottom line is obviously the time of day. So we have the time of day going across here. We're starting at 6 o'clock in the morning, going to midnight on day number 2. We're looking at alertness, body temperature, and growth hormones. So let's take a look at alertness first. Underneath alertness, if we look at what happens between 6 and 6, and then 6 and midnight, what happens? Isn't that amazing? Look at day 1 and day 2. Is it during the awake period or during the asleep period that things are changing and happening? During awake time. So between 6 o'clock in the morning and almost 9 o'clock, almost midnight, this person is awake. Look at what happens between day 1 and day 2. Is that almost identical? Isn't that fascinating? So here we go. It looks almost exactly the same. When is their alertness at its peak on day 1? 6 o'clock. How about this day? Right about 6 o'clock, though, right? Maybe 5:30. Pretty stinking close, though, right? Isn't that amazing? How about body temperature? Take a look at that. What happens with our body temperature as we're awake and we're asleep? Drop. Look at how far it drops. What about awakeness? Is it pretty consistent? I mean, it's not exactly because you do different activities throughout different days, but look at that. How about growth hormone? What happens there? Look at that. Boom. As soon as you're asleep, give it a little bit and your growth hormones shoot up, skyrocket, plummet back down, and then you just hang out throughout the day. Is it interesting? Did you ever notice that this happens every 24 hours of your life? Yeah, this kind of happens, right? Cool how your body regulates itself. So how do we know about this stuff? We do research. First one we're going to look at is the Mammoth Cave. Place where we can put people. There are no light cues, temperature cues, or humidity changes. If we're studying sleep, why would that be important? That we don't have light cues, humidity changes, and temperature changes. What do we know about light? What happens with light and sleep? Encourages sleep or decreases sleep. So when it's light out, you're more likely to be awake, and when it's dark out, you're more likely to kind of start feeling sleepy, right? So we're going to take away all light cues so you have no idea what time it is outside. What about temperature? What happens with temperature on a 24-hour cycle? Dip and go up. Typically, when is about the warmest period of the day? Mid-afternoon, for the most part, and it's cold at night. So if the temperature starts dropping, is your body going to say, I think it's getting late? Absolutely. How about humidity? We don't have a whole lot of humidity here, but any of you live anywhere where there was humidity? Yeah. What happens with humidity? So what happens is humidity actually happens in cycles as well, just as our temperature and our light. So different times throughout the day, you're going to have a heavier amount of humidity, and then other times you're going to have a lighter amount of humidity. So again, your body picks up on these things and says, hey, humidity change, I should be getting tired, or vice versa. Results, what we find, when we put people in a place where there's no light cues, temperature cues, or humidity cues, our sleep remained the same, but we started having a 25-hour day. So instead of going on a 24-hour cycle, how we do it now, if you take away all the light, temperature, the humidity, your body naturally wants to go on to a 25-hour cycle. Kind of curious. A little hard to kind of wrap your head around because we're so used to doing things the way we do things.
All right, everybody, I am going to pull you away from the live video, and instead I'm going to bring you here. I'm going to talk about jet lag real quick, and this is going to be so much faster than the recorded lecture that you were listening to. So I'll save you a couple minutes of your life. We're going to dive into jet lag, and if you're not familiar with jet lag, the symptoms of this is difficulty falling asleep and then having poor quality of sleep. And this can happen either as you travel to a different location or as you travel back home. It kind of depends, and we'll talk about that just a little bit. Sleep cycle, if it's upset, do you think that's going to make a difference on your sleeping quality? It is. What we notice is flights that do not cross timelines or time zones, meaning they go either north or south, but they stay within the same time zone. If that happens, north or south, then we do not see the symptoms of jet lag. So we know it doesn't have to do with altitude or something to do with planes and maybe pressurized air. It doesn't have anything to do with that, is what we're thinking when it comes to jet lag. So north and south, no jet lag. Now let's take a look east and west. What we find is that it's easier to fly west and lengthen your day, meaning you stay up later and then you can sleep in later. Okay, that seems to be easier on people, and we see less symptoms of jet lag. Now, if we are going to go east, we tend to shorten our day, meaning you have to go to sleep earlier and then wake up earlier. And some of us are like, whew, yes, please, I would love to go to bed early. So if it was an hour or two, we might not notice this jet lag as much. But imagine 3, 4, 5, 6 hours time difference. When you have to try to go to sleep at maybe 5 o'clock, your normal time. So 5 o'clock p.m., everybody's like, hey, time for bed. And you're like, eesh, really? It's really hard to do that. And so flying east, we see more symptoms of jet lag than when we fly west. Now, it doesn't mean you can't get them if you fly west. It's just, it looks different. All right. That is everything I'm sure you wanted to know about jet lag. Next up, we're going to talk about conducting sleep research.